90% of startups fail, particularly if you are a first-time entrepreneur. I have worked with hundreds of leaders, and many of them have been entrepreneurs, both in the business world and the nonprofit world. I myself have also started 2 businesses and work with a lot of other entrepreneurs who are also starting businesses. I am biased because I am a leadership coach, but I really think that one of the biggest reasons startups fail is a lack of leadership. Yet, I don't see a lot of people talking about leadership when you start a company. Leadership starts to become more of a topic around 5 years into a company when you already potentially have hundreds of employees. But I'd argue that the early seeds that you sow into a company and the leadership you have in the beginning is vital to what happens years later. So here are 10 things that help a startup succeed. Co-founders need to be in alignment. This is one of the biggest ways, and I don't know if we talk about this enough, but if you have a co-founder, the moment there's any friction between you, the moment your visions divert at all, the whole thing crumbles. This also goes if you bring on owners. So we can talk about co-owners. The moment the vision is not aligned, the whole thing crumbles. There are a lot of videos online about how important it is to take your time before you go into marriage. Marriage is talked about as the biggest decision you'll ever make. It is a legal, contractual obligation, and if you mess it up, you're not only going to be emotionally ruined, but there's also a financial ruin that happens. I would argue that a business partner has the same level of risk and exposure, potentially even more, than finding a spouse. And yet when we are finding a spouse, we will take years to vet the person. We will go on hundreds, if not thousands of dates. We're going to incrementally move into a partnership together. We start from getting a coffee to years later finally being at the altar and signing the contract. So we recognize that this person we're going to share our life with takes years to fully know, understand, and make a choice. And yet with a business partner, some people jump into business partnership within 1 hour, within 2 hours of meeting each other. Please, everyone, take your time and find the right partner. Find the right co-founder, find the right owners. Because the moment that there is friction or misalignment, the whole thing will fail, inevitably. When we start a startup, we have a vision for something. We want to bring something into the world. Maybe it's a service, maybe it's a product. And then we go and try it. And from there, in an ideal world, we reflect on that and we get feedback from our environment and we figure out either we're going to reinvent something or it's working and we continue. I find that most startups that don't work get stuck in one of those 3 places. Either they get stuck in being in a vision, so this is what we're dreaming about constantly, and they never take the step to do something or try it. Or some people start trying and they get addicted to the activity and everything becomes about reaction, and they never move to reflection. I have yet to see many companies that truly take the time to reflect and say, is this a worthwhile endeavor? We did the pilot, we did the project, is this worth it? Instead, because we have so much ego and identity built up around, I want to be an entrepreneur, it has to work. It has to be the thing that gets me out of the thing I'm stuck in. So we're going to keep trying, and not taking a pause to say, hey, does this actually align with my vision and mission for this company? One of the most difficult things in a business is that there are different seasons when you're in a small business. If you think about a corporation by contrast, maybe this will help illustrate it. When I feel like I'm in a corporation, it feels like it's always one season. It's like what I call monoculture. Like in the United States, you plant all one kind of crop. And it's super uniform, it's very standardized, there's climate control. Everything is always the same, always. There's this kind of crazy level of stability that doesn't actually exist in nature. When you're in an entrepreneurial role, the seasons are constantly changing. So you're always in a place of adaptation and adjustment. One of the biggest oscillations that happens in the entrepreneurial world is that sometimes you're working in your business and sometimes you're working on your business. When you're working in your business, you're actually doing the things that produce revenue. So you're actually delivering the service or you're delivering the product. So you're really working almost as if you're an employee of your own business. But then there's times you have to zoom out and work on the actual business itself. And that means building operations, systems, processes. You're actually improving the thing itself. So many entrepreneurs, they start as specialists who love doing something. They're almost what I would call artists. They love being a coach. They love making a product. And so they think about entrepreneurship as like, I just want to just do coaching full time. So why don't I quit my corporate job and I'll just do coaching? Or I'll quit my corporate job and I'll just make screwdrivers all day. That's what brings me a lot of joy. And the reality is when you are an entrepreneur and you start a business, someone needs to actually work on the business itself. So you need to be able to move between these two. Sometimes you're going to have seasons that are really about one or about the other. So in the beginning, when you just want to create something and try it and get feedback, I would say you're more likely going to be in the business almost like an employee. You made something, go try it, go try it, go try it, reflect, reinvent, try, reflect. Great. But then there are going to be moments in whole seasons where you have to say, all right, something's not working. We fundamentally need to revamp and change some basic fundamental things about this whole business. So then you're shifting to working on the business. Getting this rhythm and getting this oscillation right is vital, and it's hard to do both at once. But there will also be seasons where you have to do both at once. Maybe a little bit more one or the other. But mastering that oscillation is one of the biggest ways to make sure your company survives and thrives. One of the biggest ways that companies go wrong is they underestimate the founder's DNA within the company. So this deserves a whole video in and of itself. But a founder injects their DNA into the business. Their personality largely becomes the business. Their motivators largely become the business. The business tends to reflect the founder. So the founder would benefit from taking a hard look at themselves and asking the tough questions. If I were to just take my entity, my personality, my motivators, and scale them, what's going to be good about that and what's going to be awful about that? What are the things that maybe I shouldn't scale to the whole planet? And to do this, we need to, again, healthily disidentify with ourselves, not have a ton of ego, and be really candid about, yeah, you know what? There are these things that I'm working on, and if 10,000 people also had to work on them simultaneously, that might not be a great thing. Taking time to understand the culture that you're going to create up front will save you so much time and effort on the back end when things start to go horrible much later. Our choices today will have repercussions for years and decades and centuries to come. So rather than rush into something just because we feel like we have to do something very fast, most companies, most small businesses would really benefit from taking more reflection time, more pauses to figure out, is this actually going to serve humanity? Is this going to serve the planet? What cultural DNA will I be leaving today that will be there tomorrow? The easiest example is a lot of startups start as like a frat boy culture, and it's this boys club thing, and you want to play out being children. But then one day when you have 10,000 employees and everyone is partying and creating violence and doing nonsense, and then you want them to grow up. But you started a company and you injected this DNA of having a boys club and hanging out all day. You can't expect someone that got hired into that culture to one day wake up and become more adult and more mature. That starts from the beginning. So start the culture that you want later today. This is a variation of the one we talked about before, but another way as you get going is that co-founders start to disrespect each other and a lot of resentment grows between co-founders. One of the root causes between this is that the effort that one puts in and the contributions one puts in tend to become lumpy and one-sided over time. So for instance, if one co-founder is putting a lot more time, energy, money, whatever into the business than the other one, over time, it creates subconscious dynamics between the two co-founders. So as much as possible, stay very conscious and very intentional about how much money both co-founders are putting into a business, how much labor they're putting into the business, how much sales they're able to produce, and actually being very honest about what is happening between these two folks. And we need to respect when there's an imbalance. If you cannot keep it similar, then the next best thing is to really respect and acknowledge that the person that is actually contributing more can at times have more of a say. and to respect those because there's a balance that needs to occur. When you're starting a business, again, many times you start it as a specialist. You have learned something and you want to share it with people because you enjoy the entrepreneurial life. So I'm really good at coaching or making screwdrivers, and now I want to make a service or a product that's around what I enjoy. So we go from being a specialist to all of a sudden, as an entrepreneur, you need to become a generalist, which means learning how to do everything. This is a period of growth, learning, trial, and error, but really expanding to have some baseline knowledge of almost every single function. It is very difficult to run a business if you have no clue about finances. It's very difficult to run a business if you have no clue about marketing or sales. It's very difficult if you have no clue about HR. At some point, all of these functions need to be filled out because they are vital to a healthy organization. And in order to do that, the founders or the CEO needs to understand some basic principles around each one of those functions. Even if you say, I will go out and hire people, well, how do you know who to hire? How do you know what their specialty will be and what they'll contribute to your business? If you want to hire someone and hire someone good, then you need to ensure that you have some basic understanding of what they're going to do for you. A big one is around managing one's ego. It is a constant process of humbling oneself when you start a startup and you start a business. It is a constant effort to self-transform the self and learn and adapt and learn and adapt and learn and adapt. The more rigidity that one shows, the more stuck in a strategy one shows, the more it's likely that strategy is not going to work and then you fail. The person that is adaptable and able to change is the one that will keep the business going as things shift in the environment. All right, a big one that I see is, especially for whatever reason nowadays, is many companies are being run as if they're families. And so you hear the "we're just a family here" vibe. And that to me means that you've completely missed one of the principles of business. A business is not a family, and they run on two different set of systems. So there's two different set of principles that govern those two systems. So if you have a parent, no matter what you do to that parent, they will always be your parent. Whatever you do to a sibling, they will always be a sibling. I'm not saying you're going to get along, but there's nothing you can do to cancel the fact that you have a mother and a father. Those are roles, and those roles can never go away. For better or worse, we're stuck with these people as our parents. Each and every one of us, for all of human history, we have parents. You can't change that. A family system operates on love. It's a very interesting and unique emotion and bonding experience that happens between people in a family. A business, on the other hand, doesn't have these permanent roles. Roles are constantly changing. They're constantly evolving. That tight bond that exists between a mother and a son will never exist within a business because it is a violation of the roles. When we're in a business, we're there to perform a mission. I think about businesses really as coming together to accomplish a common goal, a common mission. So we're there in a functional role to accomplish that mission, and then we leave. We're not there to hang out. We're not there to make friends. We can be friendly. We can be collegiate. But if we stick around too much, then we start to mix and match our roles in ways that become unhealthy. So whereas a family is about love, a business is about respect. A business is about trust. These are things that we can develop and have a healthy disidentification with the business so we can go home to our family and get the love that we're seeking. When we mix and match these, we start to bring lots of dysfunction into a business. So most times that I step into a startup and they have major problems around year 5, it's because they've been running it like a family, and then all the crap that we deal with in our families emerges in our business. Families are difficult to manage, and so we need to take those dynamics very seriously and respect them. Why take very complicated dynamics and transfer them to the business world? And in the business world, things don't need to be that complex. We come together, we have a functional role, we perform a mission. Don't mix family and business. Again, we can be super friendly and super compassionate towards our colleagues. It is not about being cold or hard. It's about respecting the roles that we occupy in these different systems. All right, another one is hiring. So hiring is one of the most difficult things to do in any company, particularly in a startup. So investing in how to hire well will save you tons of time and money. I've seen many startups, many entrepreneurs, they hire a friend or who they know, they reach out to the people closest to them, and it fails. Or you don't clearly define the role. So in the beginning, you need to particularly be very shrewd about what is the role that I need, and the role comes before the person. So you look at this business, you look where it's going, what its mission, and what functional roles, what players do I need to be able to get there. When you have a very talented person, there is an instinct to warp the business around that individual and to make them the center of the business. But that fundamentally breaks some of the principles that lead to healthy businesses. We're not creating this very special thing for this special person. That creates a lot of dysfunction in businesses. Instead, we need to ask, what is the role? So as early as possible, I suggest you create job descriptions. It can feel very rigid or uncool, but that is how we know who we need in a particular position. So roles come first, positions come first, and then we need to accurately interview people so we can get a sense of, will they be good in this role? So again, skipping these steps and hiring friends or hiring based on just intuition, many times these shortcuts will cost you way too much time and money on the back end. And these individuals, even though they mean well, they can end up destroying your business. Not because they're trying to, but because they're not the right fit. And so you're spending all this time doing trial and error of who can fit in your business instead of actually moving the business forward. So really, really focusing on hiring and how to do it well becomes a vital capability to keep your company alive. When we have a company, it is coming together for a reason. There is a mission we're trying to accomplish. And that mission, of course, could be virtually anything, but we need to honestly articulate what that mission is. When you shoot an arrow, you want to know where you're shooting towards and shoot it quickly. There's direction that we're moving in. I think about a space shuttle. If you have any drag, anything that's flapping around, it's going to tear off when the space shuttle takes off. And it could cause a massive explosion. So you want to make sure there's no drag forces on your spaceship as you're launching it. And in a business, that means having a very clear purpose and mission for why you exist. Any drag forces over time will cause explosions and potentially cause the business to fail. So be very, very clear in why this thing exists and where it's going. And then don't allow people who are not the co-founders or the co-owners to sway that vision. Everyone and their mother is going to try and tell you what you should be doing. But if they're not the owner and they're not part of the founding of that company, they should not have a say. Companies are not democracies. And so, of course, we take input and feedback and we learn and we grow, especially from our customers and our clients who we're in service of course. But if all the chatter around us from friends and family tell us to sway the vision, then tell them they can invest and they can become an owner. And then their opinion will matter. But as long as they're not invested in your company, I do not believe they have a right to tell you what your vision is and what your mission is. They will just drag you off kilter and move you in a direction you don't want to be moved in. You need to be very precise with the mission, and that's when you start hiring people. Those people will come for the mission because they want to play a functional role in moving towards that mission. So be very careful and very precise with why you're doing the thing. Emotions sway strategy. So be very careful about your own emotions and the emotions of the collective company. If we experience fear, it will have a profound impact on where we end up as we pursue our vision, as we pursue our mission. If we're in fear, we might be over conservative, we might be overly aggressive, we're just reacting to things. I say this a lot, but I say it again, we need to be very responsible with the future. So as we cast forward with our vision, we need to be very careful, because if we're afraid or we're super excited, both the negative and the positive emotions will sway our vision entirely. And this decreases our precision and our accuracy. And so we might think we're flying to Seattle, and then all of a sudden you end up in Mexico. How do we end up in Mexico? Because our vision and our direction was twisted up with emotions. That is why I believe that any founder, any CEO that is running a company needs to be incredibly attuned to and aware of what is happening in their body. If you just push these emotions aside, they're still running the show unconsciously. To really understand how to have a vision and move a company forward, be very tuned in on what is fear saying to me? What is excitement saying to me? What is anger saying to me? So that we understand these information systems, and ultimately we make good choices. When we healthily process and transform our emotions, we become very clear. And it is that clarity that we need to have a vision and to move the company forward. So there are many more things that can happen when you do a startup, when you're an entrepreneur, ways we can go wrong. But these are some of the top 10 factors that I see again and again when I'm working with entrepreneurs, or even as I started my own business. Again, knowing the theory won't necessarily help us, because even as I started my businesses, I knew some of this theory, but I didn't necessarily self-apply it, or I didn't reflect on it in the proper moment in time. So I still had to learn by experience, but having some of this information helped me calibrate what was going on and move through that season with greater ease and grace. What a lot of this boils down to is, if we're starting an entity, to bring some more thoughtfulness into what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. Because when we bring that thoughtfulness, we can actually set things up for success today, so that many years from now, we're not dealing with the headaches of what went wrong. And I know some people would say, okay, I don't even know if I'm going to survive 5 years, so why should I care? Because the way you get to 5 years is about caring about 5 years. If you're making a bunch of decisions today that are just for today, then how will you get to tomorrow? How will you get to 1 week from now? The decisions we make today are investments in moving us forward to the 5-year mark, to the 50-year mark. Best way to get to 50 years as a company is to make decisions today that will get you to 50 years as a company, which means thinking about 50 years out, thinking about what will work today and in 50 years, because the decisions we make today do ripple through time and space and impact everything that will come. The early days as an entrepreneur are very important. The DNA that we insert into our company is very important. It is vital that we take a little bit of time and actually reflect on what would we like to see in the future and what will support us to build that today. What am I contributing to my company today that will hold it back tomorrow? Do I have a clear mission and vision that's about being in service of others, or is this really just about satisfying myself? Yes, having a bias for action can have some benefit, but I really think some balance with reflection and being thoughtful is really important if you want to get this thing right.